Hello, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We're reading Beowulf, an epic poem. This is part 5 of 8 parts, translated by Burton Raphael. If you remember in the last part, after killing Grendel and celebrating, we find out in the last chapter that Grendel has a mother, and the mother's coming to get him. So let's begin. Nobly by those hands now forever closed. I've heard that my people, peasants working in the fields, have seen a pair of such fiends wandering in the moors and marshes, giant monsters living in those desert lands. And they've said to my wise men that as well as they could see, one of the devils was a female creature. The other, they say, walked through the wilderness like a man, but mightier than any man. And they were frightened, and they fled, hoping to find help in Herat. And they named the huge one Grendel. If they had a father, no one knew him. If he had a father, no one knew him. Or whether there had been others before these two, hidden evil before hidden evil. They live in secret places, windy cliffs, wolf dens, where water pours from the rocks and then runs underground, where mist steams like black clouds, and the groves of trees growing over their lake are all covered with a frozen spray, and wind down snake-like roots that reach as far as the water and help keep it dark. At night, that lake burns like a torch, and no one knows its bottom. No wisdom reaches such depths. A deer hunted through the woods by a pack of hounds, a stag with great horns, though driven through the forest from faraway places, prefers to die on those shores, refuses to save its life in that water. It isn't far, nor is it a pleasant spot, and when the wind stirs and storms, waves splash toward the sky. As dark in the air, as black as the rain, that the heavens weep. Our only help, again, lies with you. Grendel's mother is hidden in her terrible home in a place that you've not seen. Seek it, if you dare, and save us once more. And again, twisted gold, heaped up from ancient treasure, will reward you for the battle that you win. So Hrothgar was telling this to Beowulf, right? The guy who killed Grendel. And then chapter 21, Beowulf spoke. Let your sorrow end. It is better for us all to avenge our friends and not mourn them forever. Each of us will come to an end of this life on earth, and he who can earn it should fight for the glory of his name. Fame after death is the noblest of goals. This is very important, right? Let's remember this. We're gonna write that down. Glory for the glory of his name. Fame after death is the noblest of goals. When Achilles was immortal, he was immortal. He asked for his mama, dipped him in the river. I forgot the name of the river, but we'll remember it. And she held his heel and dipped him in there because he wanted his name to last forever rather than just lead a regular life. That's what we know as the Achilles heel, because the heel was the only thing that wasn't dipped in the river. That's another story. Arise, guardian of this kingdom, let us go as quickly as we can and have a look at this lady monster. Beowulf is just fearless, isn't he? I promise you this. Shall find no shelter. There's no hole in the ground and no towering tree and no deep bottom of a lake where her sins can hide. Be patient for one more day of misery, and I ask for no longer. And the old king leaped to his feet and gave thanks to God for such words. And then Hrothgar's horse was brought, saddled and bridled. And the Danes' wise ruler rode, stately and splendid. Shield-bearing soldiers marched at his side. The monster's tracks led through the forest, and they followed her heavy feet. that had swept straight across the shadowy wasteland. Her burden, the lifeless body of the best of Hrothgar's men. Remember, Grendel's mom had taken Hrothgar's best friend, right? The trail took them up a towering rocky hills and over narrow winding paths that they had never seen. Down steep and slippery cliffs where creatures from deep in the earth hid in their holes. Hrothgar rode in front with a few of his most knowing men to find the way. And then suddenly, where clumps of trees bent across cold gray stones, they came to a dismal wood. Below them was a lake, and its water was bloody, bubbling. The Danes shivered, miserable, mighty men tormented by grief, seeing there on the cliff above the water Escher's bloody head. So Escher, if you remember, was Hrothgar's buddy, his good buddy, and they're coming to the edge of this water that's bloody and bubbling, and there, above the water, is Escher's bloody head. They looked down at the lake and they felt how its heat rose. They watched the waves, blood-stained, swirling. Their battle horns sounded, and then sounded again, and they set down their weapons. They could see the water crawling with snakes, fantastic serpents swimming in the boiling lake, and sea beasts lying on the rocks, the kind that infest the ocean in the early dawn, often ending some ship's journey with their wild jaws. They rushed angrily out of sight when the battle horns blew. Beowulf aimed an arrow at one of the beasts, swimming sluggishly away, and the point pierced its hide, stabbed it to its heart, and its life leaked out. Death swept it off. Quickly, before the dying monster could escape, they hooked its thrashing body with their curved boar spears, and they fought it to the land. They drew it up on the bluff, and then stood and stared at the incredible wave roamer. Notice the hyphen, wave roamer, covered with strange scales and horrible. And then Beowulf began to fasten on his armor. Okay, so he kills one of these serpents. Beowulf fastens on his armor, not afraid for his life, but knowing the woven mail with its hammered links could save that life when he lowered himself into the lake. He's getting ready to go into the lake after Grendel's mom. That life, when he lowered himself into the lake, keep slimy monsters' claws from snatching at his heart and preserve him for the battle he was sent to fight. Hrothgar's helmet would defend him, that ancient shining treasure, encircled with hard-rolled metal, set there by some smith's long dead hand, would block all battle swords, stop all blades from cutting at him when he swam toward the bottom, gone down in the surging water deep toward the swirling sands. And Unfred, you remember this is the guy who doubted Beowulf's courage, remember? And then had to shut up after he killed Grendel. Unfred helped him. Hrothgar's courtier lent him a famous weapon, a fine-hilted old sword named Huntring. So remember I told you earlier they took great pride in their weapons, and then sometimes they would name them? Well, here it is. It's a great old sword named Huntring. It had an iron blade etched and shining and hardened in blood. No one who had worn it into battle, swung it in dangerous places, daring and brave, had ever been deserted. In other words, it always worked. Nor was Beowulf's journey the first time that it was taken to an enemy's camp, or asked to support some hero's courage and win him glory. Unfred had tried to forget his greeting to Beowulf. Aha! Remember how he greeted Beowulf? He tried to forget it. Made fun of Beowulf, remember? His drunken speech of welcome. A mighty warrior, and he lent his weapon to a better one. Only Beowulf would risk his life in that lake. Unfred was afraid and gave up that last chance to work wonders and win glory and a hero's fame. See, he's afraid. But Beowulf and fear were strangers. He stood ready to dive into battle. Isn't that a nice way to say that? You're a stranger to fear? Then Ethgro's brave son spoke. Who's Ethgro's brave son? Come on, it's genealogy. It's Beowulf, of course. Remember, Hrothgar, O knowing king, now when my danger is near, the warm words that we uttered. And if your enemy should end my life, then be, generous prince, forever the father and protector of all whom I leave behind me, his men. Here in your hands, my beloved comrades, left with no leader, their leader dead. He doesn't know if he's going to live or not, and he's asking Hrothgar to take care of his men if he dies. The precious gifts you gave me, my friend, send them to Hilglek, it's his uncle, right? May he see in their golden brightness the Geat's great lord gazing at your treasure, that here in Denmark, I found a noble protector, a giver of rings, whose rewards I won and briefly relished. They keep saying the giver of rings. Keep that in mind, the rings. Do you remember a recent book? It's coming to me. Can you remember it with the word rings in it? I think J.R.R. Tolkien. Lord of the Rings. Keep that in mind as we read. This came way before Mr. Tolkien wrote those interesting books. By the way, Hobbit is not a classic. It's a nice book, but it's not a classic. This is a classic. Of rings whose rewards I won and briefly relished. He briefly relished them because he doesn't know if he's going to die. And you, Unfred, let my famous old sword stay in your hands. I shall shape glory with huntering. So he's giving him his sword. He's taking huntering, or death will hurry me from this earth. As his words ended, he leaped into the lake, and he would not wait for anyone's answer. The heaving water covered him over, and for hours he sank through the waves. And now you're going to ask yourself, well, wait a minute, how can it be for hours? I can't hold my breath for 60 seconds. Well, he's a Norseman, right? These are tough cookies. Besides, it's an enchanted lake, isn't it? Think about it. At last he saw the mud on the bottom. And all at once, the greedy she-wolf who ruled those waters for half a hundred years, discovered him, saw that a creature from above had come to explore the bottom of her wet world. Who's the greedy she-wolf? Grendel's mom. She welcomed him in her claws. She clutched at him savagely, but she couldn't harm him. She tried to work her fingers through the tight ring-woven mail of his breast, but tore and scratched in vain, and then she carried him, armor and sword and all, to her home. And he struggled to free his weapon, but he failed. The fight brought other monsters swimming to see her catch. A host of sea beasts who beat at his mail shirt, stabbing with tusks and teeth as they followed along. And then Beowulf realized suddenly that she had brought him into someone's battle hall. And there the water's heat could not hurt him, nor anything in the lake attack him through the building's high-arching roof. A brilliant light burned all around him, and the lake itself was a fiery flame. And then he saw the mighty water witch and swung his sword, his ring-marked blade, straight at her head. The iron sang its fierce song, sang Beowulf's strength. But her guests discovered that no sword could slice her evil skin, and that hunting could not hurt her, and was useless now when he needed it. This is horrible. They wrestled. She ripped and tore and clawed at him, bit holes in his helmet, and that too failed him. In other words, his sword's not working, his helmet's not working, and for the first time in years of being worn to war, it would earn no glory, his helmet. It was the last time anyone would wear it. That's foreshadowing, right? But Beowulf longed only for fame, and he leaped back into battle. He tossed his sword aside, angry, and the steel-edged blade lay where he dropped it. If weapons were useless, he would use his hands, the strength of his fingers. And so fame comes to the men who mean to win it and care about nothing else. Very important. Remember this. He raised his arms and seized her by the shoulder. Anger doubled his strength, and he threw her onto the floor. She fell, Grendel's fierce mother, and the Geat's proud prince was ready to leap on her, but she rose and at once repaid him with her clutching claws, wildly tearing at him. Beowulf was weary. That best and strongest of soldiers, his feet stumbled, and at an instant she had him down, held helpless, squatting with her weight on his stomach. She drew a dagger, brown with dried blood, and prepared to avenge her son. But he was stretched on his back, and her stabbing blade was blunted by the woven mail shirt that he wore on his chest. The hammered links held. So he's got the armor on, and they're holding. The point could not touch him. He'd have traveled to the bottom of the earth, Edgro's son, and would have died there if that shining woven metal had not helped. And holy God, who sent him victory, gave judgment for truth and right, ruler of the heavens, once Beowulf was back on his feet and fighting. More foreshadowing. So she had started stabbing him in the back. He was protected with the armor. And now he's back fighting. What a battle, ladies and gentlemen. Chapter 23. And then he saw hanging on the wall a heavy sword, hammered by giants, strong and blessed with their magic, the best of all weapons, but so massive that no ordinary man could lift it. Its carved and decorated length. He drew it from its scabbard, and he broke the chain on its hilt. And then, savage, now angry and desperate, he lifted the sword high over his head and struck with all his strength that he had left. And he caught her in the neck, and he cut it through, broke bones and all, and her body fell to the floor, lifeless. The sword was wet with her blood, and Beowulf rejoiced at the sight. The brilliant light shone suddenly as though burning in that hall, and as bright as heaven's own light lit in the sky, and he looked at her home, and then following along the wall went walking, his hand tight on the sword, his heart still hangry. He was hunting another dead monster, and he took his weapon with him for final revenge against Grendel's vicious attacks, his nighttime raids over and over, coming to Heorot when Hrothgar's men slept, killing them in their beds. Eating some on the spot, he's retelling the story of Grendel, 15 or more, and running to his lonesome moor with another such sickening meal waiting in his pouch. But Beowulf repaid him for those visits, and found him lying dead in his corner, armless, exactly as that fierce fighter had sent him out from Herod. And then he struck off his head with a single blow. So he goes looking for Grendel's body, finds it, and beheads Grendel's body. The body jerked for the last time and then lay still. Maybe Grendel wasn't dead. These wise old warriors who surrounded Hrothgar like him staring into the monster's lake, saw the waves surging and blood spurting through. And then they spoke about Beowulf. All the graybeards, they whispered together, and they said that they that hope was gone and that the hero had lost fame and his life at once and would never return to the living, come back as triumphant as he had left. Almost all agreed that Grendel's mighty mother, the she-wolf, had killed Beowulf. The sun slid over the past noon and went further down, and the Danes gave up, and they left the lake, and they went home, Hrothgar with them. But the Geats stayed. They sat sadly, watching, imagining that their lord, but not believing that they would ever see him again. Then the sword, melted, blood-soaked, dripping down like water, disappearing like ice when the world's eternal Lord loosens invisible fetters and unwinds icicles and frosts as only he can. He who rules time and seasons. He who is truly God. The monster's hall was full of rich treasures, but all that Beowulf took was Grendel's head and the hilt of the giant's jeweled sword. The rest of that ring-marked blade had dissolved in Grendel's steaming blood, boiling even after his death. And then the battle's only survivor, Beowulf, swam up and away from those silent corpses. The water was calm and clean, and the whole huge lake peaceful once the demons who lived in it were dead. Then that noble protector of all seamen swam to land, rejoicing in the heavy burdens that he was bringing with him. He and all the glorious band of Geats thanked God that their leader had come back unharmed. They left the lake together. The Geats carried Beowulf's helmet and his mail shirt. Behind them, the water slowly thickened as the monster's blood came seeping up. And then they walked quickly, happily, across the roads. All of them remembered that they remembered, and left the lake and the cliffs alongside it. Brave men, staggering under the weight of Grendel's skull. Too heavy for fewer than 4 men to handle. Huh, that's a big head, isn't it? 2 on each side of the spear jammed through it, and yet proud that their ugly load and determined that the Danes seated in Herod should see it. So imagine they've got the head of Grendel with spears in it, and they're carrying it, right? 2 guys, 2 spears, 2 guys on each side of that head. Soon 14 geeks arrived at the hall, bold and warlike, and Beowulf, their lord and leader, they walked into the mead hall green. Then the Geats' brave prince entered Herod covered with glory for the daring battles that he had fought. He sought Hrothgar and saluted him and showed Grendel's head. He carried that terrible trophy by the hair. Now remember, there were 4 guys carrying it. He carries it by the hair. Why? He's extraordinary strength. He brought it straight to where the Danes sat, drinking, the queen among them. It was weird and a wonderful sight, and the warriors stared. Beowulf spoke, chapter 24. Hrothgar, behold, great Helfaldane's son. Who's this? That's Hrothgar. Remember, they say the name and then they say the genealogy. The name, the genealogy, right? This glorious sign of victory brought you by joyful Geats. My life was almost lost fighting for it, struggling underwater. I'd have been dead at once and the fight finished, the she-devil victorious, if our Father in heaven had not helped me. Huntring, Unfrith's noble weapon, could do nothing, nor could I, until the ruler of the world showed me, hanging shiny and beautiful on the wall, a mighty old sword. And so God gives guidance to those who can find it from no one else. Very important. He's giving credit to God for helping him beat Grendel's mom. And I used the weapon that he had offered me, and I drew it, and when I could, swung it, and I killed the monstrous hag in her own home. And then the ring-marked blade burned away. as the boiling blood spilled out. I carried off all that was left, this hilt. The ring-marked blade burned away. All he's got is the sword's hilt, because the blood burned the blade away. Ugh. Evil. Evil! I've avenged their crimes and the Danes they've killed, and I promise you that whoever sleeps in Harad, you, your brave soldiers, anyone, of all your people in Denmark, old, young, they, you, may now sleep without fear of either monster, mother or son. And then he gave the golden sword hilt to Hrothgar, who held it in his wrinkled hands and stared at what giants had made. Giants used to roam the earth. And monsters owned. It was his, an ancient weapon shaped by wonderful smiths. Now that Grendel and his evil mother had been driven from the earth, God's enemies scattered and dead, that best of swords belonged to the best of Denmark's rulers, the wisest ring-giver Danish warriors had ever known, Hrothgar. The old king bent close to the handle of the ancient relic, and he saw written there the story of ancient wars between good and evil. It's on the sword's hilt. The opening of the waters, the flood, sweeping giants away. The flood. There's a story. Remember Noah's Ark? How they suffered and died, that race who hated the ruler of all of us and received judgment from his hands. Surging waves that found them wherever they fled. And Hrothgar saw runic letters, clearly carved in that shining hilt, spelling its original owner's name, he for whom it was made, with its twisted handle and snake-like carvings. Use your imagination to try to see the hilt of a sword that this guy's holding. And then Hrothgar spoke, Helfaldane's son, and everyone was silent. What I say, speaking from a full memory, and after a life spent in seeking what was right for my people, is this. This prince of the Geats, Beowulf, was born a better man. Your fame is everywhere, my friend. It reaches to the ends of the earth, and you hold it in your heart wisely, patient with your strength and our weakness. What I said I will do. I will do. In the name of friendship that we've sworn, your strength must solace your people now, and mine no longer. As Hermod, be not as Hermod once was to my people, too proud to care what their hearts hid, bringing them only destruction and slaughter. In his mad rages, he killed them himself, comrades and followers who ate at his table. At the end, he was alone, and he knew no joys of life with other men. A famous ruler, granted greater strength than anyone alive in his day, but dark and bloodthirsty in spirit. He's telling Beowulf, don't be like this guy. He shared out no treasures, showed his soldiers no roads to riches and fame. And then, pardon me, sorry. He shared it. And then that affliction on his people's face suffered horribly for his sins. That affliction on people's face. Be taught by this lesson, Beowulf, and learn what a king must be. I tell his tale, old as I am, only for you. Our eternal Lord grants some men wisdom, some wealth, and makes others great. The world is God's. He allows a man to grow famous and his family rich, gives him land and towns to rule and delight in, and lets his kingdom reach as far as the world runs. And who in human unwisdom, in the middle of such power, remembers that it will all end, and too soon? Prosperity, prosperity, prosperity. Nothing troubles him. No sickness, not passing time, no sorrows. No sudden war breaking out nowhere. But all the world turns when it spins. How can he know when he sins? He's giving Beowulf advice on how to rule. He's basically saying, think about your own people. So what's a rune? He's reading the sword up here, runic letters. A rune is a letter set in alphabets known as runic alphabets, the Germanic people. Got it? Chapter 25. This is Hrothgar still talking to Beowulf, giving him advice. And then pride grows in his heart, planted quietly, but flourishing. And while the keeper of his soul sleeps on, while conscience rests, and the world turns faster, a murderer creeps closer, comes carrying a tight-strung bow with terrible arrows. And those sharp points strike home and are shot in his breast under his helmet. He's helpless. And so the devil's dark urgings wound him, for he can't remember how he clung to the rotting wealth of this world, and how he clawed to keep it, and how he earned no honor, no glory in giving golden rings, and how he forgot the future glory God gave him at his birth, and forgetting did not care. And finally, his body fails him. These bones and flesh, quickened by God, fall and die. And some other soul inherits his place in heaven, and some open-handed giver of old treasures who takes no delight in mere gold. Guard against such wickedness, Beowulf, beloved Beowulf, best of warriors, and choose instead eternal happiness. Push away pride. Ladies and gentlemen, push away pride. Your strength, your power are yours. For how many years? Soon you'll return them where they came from. Sickness or a sword's edge will end them, or a grasping fire, or the flight of a spear, or surging waves, or a knife's bite, or the terror of old age, or your eyes darkening over. It will come. Death comes faster than you think. No one can flee it. So I have led the Danes for 500 years, protected them from all peoples on this earth, and my sword and my spear so ready that no one anywhere under God's high sun was eager to wage war here in Denmark. And here too, the change has come. And we wept for our dead when Grendel invaded Heorot, and my enemy raided this hall. My sorrow, my grief was as great and lasting as it was helpless. And then thanks be given to God, eternal God of all of us, you came. And that endless misery was over. And I lived now to behold this bloody head. Go in, feast. Be as happy as your fame deserves. And when morning shines, we shall each have owned more of my treasure. This is an extraordinary speech by the king, so grateful to Beowulf for what he has done for him by killing Grendel. But he's also giving him huge advice. The best piece of advice, push away pride. We'll talk about that in the analysis. Beowulf obeyed him and entered Heorot cheerfully and took his place at the table. And once again, the Danes and the Geeks feasted together, a host of famous warriors in a single hall. And then the web of darkness fell, and it was night. They rose. Hrothgar, the gray-haired old Dane, was heavy with sleep, and Beowulf was glad that a bed was waiting. You think? Yes, sir. He was glad, wasn't he? And Beowulf was glad, waiting, the bravest of warriors, exhausted with the work that he had done. A Danish servant showed him to the road to the far-off, quiet country where sleep would come and take him and his followers. Hrothgar's visitors were well cared for. Whatever they needed was theirs. And then Beowulf rested. Heorot rose high above him, gleaming in the darkness. The Geats slept till the black-feathered raven sang his cheerful song, and the shining sun burned away shadows. And those seafarers hurried from their beds, anxious to begin the voyage home, ready to start, their hearts already sailing on the ship's swift back. Say that 5 times. Ship's swift back. Then Unferth came, with Huntring, the sword, his famous sword, and he offered it to Beowulf, and he asked them to accept the precious gift. And the prince took it, thanked him, and declared the weapon one that he was proud to own. His words blamed it for nothing. Remember, it didn't work against Grendel's mom. Were spoken like the hero that he was. You see how the narrator tells us this is not just being polite to each other. This is kind of like warriors respecting warriors. So Unferth, the guy who was, he just remembered he greeted Beowulf that way, regretted it, and then gives him his sword. The war gear was ready, and the Geats were armored and eager to be gone. And quickly Beowulf sought Hrothgar's throne, where the king sat waiting for his famous visitor's farewell. Chapter 26. Beowulf spoke. We crossed the sea to come here. It is time to return, to go back to our beloved Lord Hilgrith. Denmark was a gracious host, and you welcomed us warmly. Anything I can do here on this earth to earn your love, O great king, anything more than I have done, battles I can fight in your honor, summon me, and I will come as I came, once before. If I hear from across the ocean that your neighbors have threatened you with war or oppressed you, as enemies once oppressed you here, I will bring 1,000 warriors, 1,000 armed Geats to protect your throne. I trust Hilgrith, his uncle, our king, is young, but if I need his help to better help you, to lend you our strength, our battle-sharp spears, to shield you and honor you as you deserve, I know his words and his deeds will support me. And someday, if your oldest son, Hilgrith, comes visiting to our court, he will find a host of good friends among the Geats. No one who goes visiting far-off lands is more welcome than a strong and noble warrior. Hrothgar replied, All-knowing God must have sent you such words. Nothing so wise from a warrior so young has ever reached these ancient ears. Your hands are strong, and your heart and your lips are knowing. If your lord, Helreth's son, that's Hillick, is slain by a spear, or falls sick and dies, or is killed by a sword, and you have survived whatever battle sweeps him off, I say that the Geats could do no better, find no man better suited to be a king, keeper of warriors and their treasure than you. If you take the throne, they will surely offer you. Beloved Beowulf, you please me more the longer I can keep you here in Denmark. You've turned Danes and Geats into brothers. You've brought peace where once there was war, and you've sealed friendship with affection. This will last as long as I live, and I am king here, and we will share our treasures, greeting travelers from across the sea with outstretched hands. Ring-powered ships, will carry our gifts and the tokens of our love. And your people live by the old ways. Their hearts, like ours, are forever open to their friends, but firmly closed against their enemies. And then he gave the Geats prince, a dozen new gifts. Keeps pouring gifts on this guy, right? On Beowulf. Prayed for his safety. Commanded him to seek his people. And yet not to delay too long in visiting Hrothgar once more. Please come back and visit me. The old king kissed him and held that best of warriors by his shoulder and wept, unable to hold back his tears. Gray, wise, he knew how slim were his chances of ever greeting Beowulf again. But seeing his face, he was forced to hope. His love was so warm to be hidden. His tears came running down quickly to be too quickly to be checked. His very blood burned with longing. And then Beowulf left him, left Heorot, and he walked across the green in his golden armor, exulting in the treasures that were heaped high in his arms. And his ships was at anchor, and he had it ready to sail. And so Hrothgar's rich treasures would leave him, travel far from the perfect king, without fault or blame, until winter had followed winter, and age had stolen his strength, spirited it off as it steals from many men. Whew. You think that's the end? That's not the end, ladies and gentlemen. Although it's a good ending, isn't it? What a guy. What a hero. Beowulf. Right? Learn more about Beowulf by watching and reading along with Jimmy on the ongoing videos. This was part 5 of 8 parts of the epic poem Beowulf. And be sure to visit and read other classics which are on this website. And if you have questions, which I'm sure you may, or maybe you don't, isn't this a good story? Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Remember, this is part 5 of 8. There's 3 more parts to read. I know you may think it's the end because these monsters are dead, but there's always another monster lurking around, isn't there? There's always another monster. Stay safe. Make sure your armor, you keep your armor on, and avoid monsters at all costs. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.